Oh, hello there.
And starting off at the number 10 spot with the top 10 hardest bosses in SoulsBorne, we have Ornstein and Smo. Everyone and their mother knows about this iconic duo. As some of you may know, Dark Souls was my first Souls game, and just to set the bar, I almost stuck at the Taurus Demon, the second boss fight in the whole game, for a whole 2 days. Almost that bad. So imagine me fighting not one hard boss, but 2. And if it wasn't for this genius arena with the pillars, I would have probably quit the game. They complemented each other perfectly with Smo's slow hard hitting attacks and Ornstein's fast, less harder attacks. I can't manage 2 fodder enemies by themselves, so imagine here. Make sure to not deal damage to both of them, only focus one down, as whoever you kill first, a second phase will start with whoever you haven't killed the first time. The last one standing will suck the dead one's power and become larger with lightning, butt slams, and attacks. I always prefer killing Ornstein first as I feel like he is much harder to deal with. And moving on to the number 9 spot with Sister Freed, a 3 health bar fight with each one getting progressively harder. Her first phase is simple enough with a few scythe slashes, scythe spins, and what I find is the hardest is when she goes invisible then jumps to another part of the arena. I can never figure out where she is and most of the time I get backstabbed. Speaking of backstabs, you can actually backstab her like any other enemy. However, I always find her to dash away. Second phase, her father resurrects her, so now it's a gang fight. Freed stays a bit back and more passive with the same moveset though. Father Arundel on the other hand is much more aggressive and pushes you while slamming his fiery bowl. Thank god they both share a health bar, as y'all know from my experience with ONS, I hate gang fights. And also thankfully Arundel's brain dead and you can just whack away at him for basically no consequence. The third phase, the hardest one obviously, Freed comes back to life for the 3rd time. This time she combines both ice and fire, wielding 2 different scythes, one ice and the other a black flame. She is much more aggressive here and I find the windows of attack to be kinda small. I always find myself to roll a lot of her attacks, then I barely get a hit in, and then it's back to rolling. She slits your throat, creates black flame tornadoes, and has long combos. The DLC was a bit underwhelming, but she saved it at the end. And moving on to the number 8 spot with Dark Eater Midir. This is how dragon fights should be. Camera focus on the head of the dragon, not the legs. Well telegraphed moves so I should know what's gonna happen next. I'm so happy about this formula back with
Curse you, Bale!
Midir can spew fire 3 different ways. One is in a straight line, other is when you're under him, and the last one is spews fires everywhere then does this charging attack with many hand slashes. But if you're underneath him right before he does this attack, you will literally miss every single attack. You do kind of have to chase him because he tends to run away for a bit. And oh my god, his second phase. He's relentless. He will start off with shooting purple laser which has explosion afterwards, fly up, breathe air, use dark explosion, dark projectiles. He never stops attacking, and I can barely get any attacks in before he does his next move. There were just too many close calls, and if it wasn't for this tiger at the end, I probably would have died. And moving on to the number 7 spot with Slave Knight Gale. Not only is he top 10 hardest bosses, he's also one of the best and enjoyable fights. Gale's first phase is very simple with well telegraphed attacks, piercing attacks, plunging, and rage attack, where you'll go all berserk and you must roll instantly as soon as you can to avoid the attacks. In his second phase, he has much more attacks, a repeating crossbow, and even holy rings. Most of his attacks with his sword have a follow-up attack with the red cape. He will launch you high up, struck lightning down on you, and even throw red soul skulls, all with brutal combos. The build up to this boss was amazing, and it definitely took me the longest in whole Dark Souls 3, and it's the best fight in Dark Souls 3 as well. And moving on to number 6 spot with Father Owl, your father's spine. At least I think so, someone correct me if I'm wrong. He's so much harder and fun than his other fight. And how is a man in his 70s this agile? Like, look at him flying all over the place. Of course, him being a shinobi, he will use firecrackers and shurikens at his disposal. The good thing is there are a few good punishable attacks, like every time he uses firecrackers, if you manage to dodge it of course, you can punish him every time. You may even Mikiri him. Once again, like everything in Sekiro, Mortal Blade is your best friend here. Do not thrust attack him as he will Mikiri you. His second health bar, he will summon the owl in his name. The actual owl doesn't do much except allow Father to teleport behind you. And also when he goes on fire, like the owl goes on fire and like launches at you, I never knew how to dodge this consistently. I dodge it sometimes I don't. But at least I always Mikiri Father afterwards. Problem is he does a good amount of damage, and if he does hit you, he follows it up with many other attacks I didn't even know existed.
Defeated by my own son. Not entirely unpleasant.
Moving on to the number 5 spot with Moat, Lord of Blood. It took me around 3 to 4 hours to beat him, and that's because of his such delayed attacks that always gets me. With them also throwing fire blood at you from afar, it just depletes my flasks. After passing a certain threshold of damage, count down from kill. During his counting down, you can get some damage in, and when he finally reaches, he will deal blood and a bunch of damage, with him also healing. But thank god you can fully counter this with the crystal tier, which completely removes you from any harm. And you can get some attacks in as well. Second phase, it grows wings and can fly and deal more damage to you and throws fire blood after every single attack, which stays on the floor for a while as well, which always just ended my demise. And someone explained to me, how does a Lord of Blood weak to blood? It just doesn't make sense, does it? But at least he finally beat the allegations. Moving on to the number 4 spot, we have Ishin the Sword Saint. He's the only final boss of the main game in this list. But before getting to Ishin, you must fight Genichiro first for the 3rd time. You should be able to defeat him pretty easily. Just make sure to not take too much damage here, as you will need all the healing gourds you can get. Genichiro sacrificed himself to revive his grandfather's prime, Ishin. His first phase is simple enough, but it's not easy, it's simple. But has a few moves you should look out for, like the Ashina Cross or the Ichimichi Double. Second phase is the hardest in my opinion, and he summons a hell long spear out of seemingly nowhere. And I wish he actually does some attacks that you can actually make Kiri. At least in my experience, he barely does any, and all the time he did, I missed it. He has insane range with a leaping slam and shooting sweep, which I always miraculously manage to get hit by. And oh yeah, I almost forgot he has a pistol, which decimates your posture. Then finally, third phase is the exact same as the second phase, but made even easier, thank god, as he has lightning, now which you can just deflect and deal a bunch of damage to him. And it all ends with a satisfying, honorable finish. And now moving on to number 3 spot, we have Renala, my personal favorite boss in the whole DLC. Her moves are so deadly but so satisfying to dodge. Her combos feel like they take an eternity to end up. She uses magic soul spears, magic great swords to deal a stupid amount of damage. Unlike Melania, she sadly cannot get staggered, at least with my build. Let me know if you guys could stagger her. You can only get 1 or maybe 2 attacks in, but it's a common theme with these Shadow of Erdtree bosses that you barely get any damage in anyways. Her second phase, one of her twin blades becomes a fire and the other becomes a magic sword. She becomes much more aggressive, more than she already was somehow, much stronger. The triple moon attack, it looks very scary, I'll admit it looks very scary, but I found it just to be the easiest move. Literally just jump 3 times, but if you miss it, you will die.
I am Melania, Blade of Mikola. And I have never known defeat.
She took me over 5 hours to beat, and it's the only thing between me and the almighty Platinum. In her first out of 2 health bars, Melania is pretty laid back, you know, not as aggressive in her second phase, and you can stagger her to an oblivion. She does have a few BS moves and mechanics, like she can heal every time she hits you, so you can trade hits as she always have the upper hand and gain that health back. Throwing projectiles is pretty much useless, as she'll dodge them and maybe even dodge your own attacks. But then again, when do you really throw a projectile? And when she like clicks her prosthetic and dashes at you and like swings 4 times, I generally thought you must get hit by it, because rolling backward was not cutting it. But you can just roll to the left or right, and voila, you miss all her slashes. Of course, the waterfowl move. We all know how this looks like and how many times we've died by it. And I know there is a way to dodge it when you're close to her, but I don't have the skills for that. So I just run away, tank some damage, and hope for the best. The problem is, if you do get hit, you will get Sonic to death. Second phase, she will crash into you and create a Scarlet Flower, which deals, of course, Scarlet Flower, like what else would it deal? If you're within range, I recommend going in halfway after she's done the attack to deal damage to her. It is worth the risk. It's really worth it. Like the amount of damage you can do in that time, you might die in the process, but it's worth it. Although I've died many times to the waterfowl move, this move she does, like where she has like clones attacking you, and there's like 4 of them dealing insane damage and have a good range. Couple with her delayed 5th attack where she actually attacks you and not her clones. This move got me so much, as always when she's low HP. Before we go to the number 1 spot, I have a few honorable mentions I thought worth mentioning. The Orphan of Kos. I understand why he would be one of the hardest bosses at the time, but I after Radon, so you can imagine, you know, it wasn't that hard. It's an unfair ranking, but I can't really do much. Same thing with Nameless King.
Curse you, Bale!
He is more of a cinematic masterpiece than a hard boss, but he's still in like the top 20. And we also have Manus, Father of the Abyss, Bloodborne boss in Dark Souls. Do I need to say more? And finally, the Demon of Hatred. I would say it's actually the hardest, as I've never beat him. I just made him jump off a cliff. Listen, I was scared, okay?
The last boss of the DLC is no doubt the hardest From Software boss I have ever done, and it makes Orphan of Kos and Millennia look laughably easy.
I want to thank you guys, because as in the video I ranked the Shadow of the Erdtree bosses, I said, and I'm disappointed to say I was not able to beat him. I spent well above 12 hours on him, I think like 2 days, but you guys gave me some tips and I was finally able to beat him, so thank you. It only took 16 hours, but I beat him. His first phase, he has a few punishable attacks, very few, like the spinning one or like the ninja flips. Except for the double slash. I actually think you're supposed to get hit. It's impossible to dodge it. Maybe you can parry it, I'm not really sure. Never tried it, never will. His bread and butter moves are actually not that bad to dodge. I at least found it quite enjoyable. I just wish the rest of the boss was like that. And when he throws meteorites at you, just run away to the side till the last second and roll. So it's pretty... Second phase is where all the BS starts. Instantly run like as soon as the cutscene finishes. Because he will do a big AoE attack covering a lot of the arena. He has these holy clones that deal basically negligible damage, but it will stall out you till Radon actually finishes you off. The holy beams after every single attack is just forcing you to spam roll everything and hope for the best. You just spam roll this, spam roll that, and there's just so much going on the screen that's like, I don't even know what's gonna happen. All I do is just roll. At least you get some hugs and kisses. Anyways, this was my ranking for the top 10 hardest bosses. Let me know down below what was the hardest boss you've encountered. And if you're interested in more rankings, you can check out this video where I ranked the SoulsBorne games.